Module 1, Section 5, Objective 9. And that says use fact families and properties to do mental multiplication. Okay, so what are fact families and fact properties? Okay, so for example, I'm not going to use the table for a second. If I had 3 times 4 equals 12, then 3, 4, and 12 are considered a fact family. Okay, and later on we will see more why this works, because 3 times 4 gives you 12, but 12 divided by 4 gives you 3, and 12 divided by 3 gives you 4. So these numbers are related using inverse operations, multiply and divide. Okay, so that's kind of a fact family, 3, 4, and 12, because they're all connected. Okay, so using the times table chart, I'm sure you've already, well, most of you have already seen one, but I'm going to explain how to do it just in case, all right? So, for the first example, 6 times 7, we're going to find 6, and I'm just going to highlight that entire row, and then we're going to find 7, and I'm going to highlight that entire column. Where they cross is your answer. Okay, do we have to do the first one in the first row and the second one in the second column? Definitely not. If I were to reverse it and do the 7 in the first, or the 7 in the rows and the 6 in the columns, you can see that we get 42 again anyway. Okay, so that proves a commutative property as well, so that you can do it in either order. Now, in order to practice your times tables, you could use a blank chart like this and just have the numbers down the side and the numbers across the top, and you have to fill in everything in the middle. Give yourself a little challenge is don't put these numbers in order or these numbers in order, and you actually have to concentrate for each square instead of, finding shortcuts. Because if you look going across on the 2's column, you can count by 2's. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, etc. The 5s you can count by 5s, and the 10s you count by 10s. I don't know how many people that like to count by 7s, so that one might be a little bit harder. But the idea is not to get your answer by adding, but to actually memorize that. Okay? Memorizing your times tables are going to be one of the best things that you can do for yourself to move forward. You don't have to rely on a calculator. You don't have to rely on paper or anything if you know your times tables up to 12s. Okay, so we already figured out that 6 times 7 is 42. But if you do the 6th row and you go over to the 7th column, there you go, it's 42. Or you could do the 7th row to the 6th column, or the 6th column to the 7th row, or the 7th row to the 6th column. Doesn't matter. Or you can cross them both from, like I showed you the first way. Doesn't matter how you get it, you just need to get it and get it correct. Okay, so next, 3 times 9. So I'm going to go to the 9th row and go over to the 3rd. I choose the bigger number and then go across the fewer number of columns. That's just how I choose to do it. Okay, so on C, I would go to the 8th row and go over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There it is. And the last one here, 5 times 12, so 12, go over to the 5th. There it is, 60. Okay, example 13. Write at least 2 different ways that you can multiply each expression using mental math. Okay, and I erased theirs again because they were kind of complicated, and trying to figure out how to do it mentally, I'd rather just explain it. So here we go. On the first one, if you multiply just straight across, that's one way. So that's just going to be 2 times 3 we're going to do it first, so I'm going to put it in parentheses, and then times 6. So 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 times 6 is 36. Okay, then a second way, I'm going to write it over again over here. Notice I'm changing the x's to dots, but that's all right. Okay, so another way, I don't know necessarily that this is any easier. In fact, the way that we did it is probably the easiest. We're going to do 2 and then 3 times 6 in parentheses. So we're going to go 2 times 18, and doing that in your head is not too easy, but it is 36. Okay, so we didn't change the order. I used the associative property and chose which two I was going to group together first. Can you change the order? Absolutely. It says at least 2 different ways, so I'm just going to stick with 2. Okay, how about this one? Let's just go straight across for 1. So I want to do 4 times 5 first, and then multiply by 3. So we get 20 times 3 would be 60. 60, there we go. Okay, and rewriting it so I can do it again, we have, whoops, there we go, 4, and again I'm going to use dots instead of parentheses, but it means the same thing, right? Okay, so this time, let's rearrange it and do the 5 and the 3 in parentheses. Because we're going to do those first instead. So 4 times 15 is also 60. Okay, could I have changed the order? Absolutely. So 4 times 5 times 3 was our original. And now I'm going to reorder it. And let's do, let's move the 3 into the middle and the 5 at the end. And then just go straight across. So I get 12 times 5, which would be 60. Okay, so this here is the commutative property. These are the associative property. So we're using properties to make mental math better. Okay, so let's look over at C now. Going straight across, that means we're going to do 3 times 5 first. So I'm going to put those in parentheses. And the 2 on the outside. So we get 15 times 2, which is 30. That's one way. Now another way, rewriting it, I'm going to do the second 2 first. So I'm going to leave the 3 alone and then group the 5 and the 2. So 3 times 10 is 30. I like that way better because it's easier to times by 10s than by 15s. And if you notice that, that's great. Do it first. Okay, so down here on D, doing it in the same order, just because we've been doing that. Straight across, we get parentheses 5 times 5 and then times 4. So 5 times 5 is 25. 25 times 4 is 100. Okay, rewriting it again so I can do it a second way. And let's regroup the second 2. Now notice I left the dot on that one. That means multiply, right? You squish it next to a parenthesis, it means multiply. So 5 times 20 gives me 100. Okay, so you can do things different ways to make them easier, and you'll get used to looking at the numbers to see which ones you want to multiply first. You'll just get used to it after a while.